Hello everyone, and welcome to this launch webinar of a very exciting feature that we have in Tacton CPQ called Service Sales. And I'm here today with Product Manager for this feature, Andreas Edlund. Welcome.
Thank you.
This talk is going to be structured in the way that I will start with some pain points and challenges that drives this new feature. And then Andreas will come back and run sort of a demo. And then at the end, there will be some conclusions and business value created. So bear with us. Let's go. We at Tacton, our target customers are B2B manufacturing companies. They typically operate in these industries. Typically, they have large equipment, machinery, with high product variance. They need to adjust and tailor these solutions to their customers in multiple different ways in order to win the deals. That means addressing customer needs, spatial constraints, but also regulations and compliance, which may be local to the site where it's going to be installed. Also, these equipments also are often combined with services in different ways in order to ensure the value, the long-term value of the equipment. The buying of one of these products is just the beginning of a long journey that these companies have with their customers, the customer life cycle. So after you buy the equipment, you install it, you commission it, and so forth, then there is an aftermarket or owning phase of that equipment in the life cycle where you maintain, where you upgrade it, and eventually then buy a new piece of equipment down the line. So this buying and owning phase are equally important to retain the customers that they have. And it's not only to create the customer loyalty here that's important. That aftermarket sales phase is also an important revenue source for B2B manufacturers. One study that tried to measure this estimated that 30 to 49% of the total revenue of these companies typically come from the owning phase or the aftermarket sales. So this is not only to maximize and retain the customers, it's also a very important revenue source for B2B manufacturers. And the services that we are talking about here can be of different types, right? It can be breakdown support. If the machine happens to break down or malfunction, there needs to be a fast response in order to minimize the downtime of the equipment. Preventive maintenance is a sort of future-looking forecasting maintenance to prevent those breakdowns from happening. Oftentimes there are consumables involved. Think about the packaging line. You need the cartons for an elevator. Maybe you need grease for the cables and so forth. Spare parts and spare part services is also important. Maybe there is a shelf in the factory where the most important spare parts are kept and maintained by the manufacturing company in order to ensure to minimize the breakdown of the equipment. Training services for operators and so forth. And eventually also when there is a time for upgrade, maybe you need expert consultancies in different ways. So all of these together, it's a smorgasbord of services to really achieve that customer loyalty that you want to maintain and to maximize the value of the purchased assets. And these services can be quite complex, and that's what Tacton CPQ service sales addresses. So the challenges that we've seen from our customers and the driver for this new feature is how do you define the right services for the purchased asset? Again, those assets will be individualized and tailored for each customer. How do you ensure that you tailor the services in the right way to maximize the value of the asset? How do you optimize the asset's lifetime and uptime and performance with those services? How do they really address the challenges that the customer has? And also, how do you estimate the cost? Because again, these services can be complex, advanced. There is often different kinds of costs associated with them, and you need to ensure that you have a margin to the services that you sell and that you offer. These service contracts needs to involve some sort of cost estimates. And how do you ensure that that is accurate and to the point, to the quote? And also, how do you, in the service quoting process, how do you shorten the sales cycles here and immediately respond to the customer in the best possible way? So those are the drivers behind what you're going to see here now. And although these challenges are general for many B2B manufacturing industries, we have worked closely with one pilot customer in this. It's a global packaging equipment industry. So we've really secured that the features of this new capability is in line with them and the different industries that we serve. So with that, this is a segue over to Andreas. So welcome and take it on.
Thank you, Per. So we're going to look into a little bit now what actually is done inside CPQ service sales in the Tacton environment. So I'm going to walk through a little bit what you can do and what the major capabilities are here, so you get an understanding and feel if this is something for you to use. First of all, this is something that's, as Per mentioned, is targeting the aftermarket, so selling services after you have already sold your capital equipment, for example. So it's a new part of the journey for sales here. And as you can see on this slide, it's the service part of the journey that we're now targeting. So what is it? If we're looking at a very high level, it consists of three major parts, where the first part is that we now, for the first time, targeting our customer base, installed base. So you can actually look at what do you have installed at your customer sites all over the world and provide services for those installed machinery or equipment that you have. So this is the first major pillar. The second one is, of course, that we provide a way of configuring the services, which is a new object in the CPQ, similar for you, those of you who are familiar with CPQ. Up till today, we had a configure product. Now we're introducing something called configure service, which works in a similar way, but for services, of course. That object in itself has a couple of sub-parts that are important and new that we want to highlight here. And one is, of course, what are the scope of the services? So only just because a customer has multiple machines or assets doesn't mean that you need to provide every time services for all of them. So of course, you need to have a scope of the assets that you want to sell services for. And also, when doing services, a major part of it is, of course, having people involved many times. And what are the roles that's needed for this type of service that you want to provide? The other one is, of course, the products when you do services. And we're coming a little bit back to that and more in detail, but products. By products, we don't mean necessarily the physical products, but it can be like trainings, that is one type of service, or actual maintenance, someone coming out and changing the oil on something is also another type of service. And we have, with this new capability, provide a new set of archetypes for those kind of different products. The last part is to address the preventive maintenance, which is a big thing within, as Per mentioned, we're working with one pilot customers, and with certain industries and verticals, it's very big on the preventive maintenance. And we've also, with this, now introducing a scheduling part. So once you know how long the contract is, which services you want to provide, Tacton CPQ will help you to set all the events needed and when then they will happen over that period of time. So that's part of this service sales. And of course, all this ends up in a result where you can see exactly what will happen when, and to what cost and price, so you can offer a good service contract to your customers. The last part is the negotiation part, where we're now introducing, up until now we've been having the product pricing, now we're introducing something new called category pricing. So depending on which categories you divide your services into, you can then price by category. If you want to make a lot of discounts on trainings, but then instead of doing it on the consumables, for example, we're now adding that capability. So this is the big blocks, or the big high-level solution, and what's worth taking with you here is it works on the installed base. That's the biggest change toward, in difference to what we do today. So let's have a little bit closer look on what we're actually doing. So first of all, in Tacton, if you're going to use services, the first thing to know is that all the installed base is connected to an account. So the account object in CPQ is where you can tie from an external system via an API all the assets that that customer has, and that lives on the account of a certain object. All those rows that you see here in the screen are we referring to as assets, and all of these assets are then potential of carrying services or objects that you can sell services to. And the last part, we do group them into system. And system is a way of grouping, because it might be that a single line, for example, in a factory can consist of multiple assets, and you want to have them grouped and provide the same services for the whole line, but sometimes you want to provide explicit services for the separate assets. And that's what we refer to as system in this context. If we're looking into one of these assets, since they're all living and mastered in a separate system, you do have the flexibility and can configure what information you want the sales to see. That's what we refer to as an asset summary. It's a read-only, but it looks at whatever system or whatever source you have, so you can see what information is available, and you can use it within your service configuration. That's a list of asset attributes. And once again, they are not mastered in CPQ, they're just here for the purpose of reading and understanding what is this asset on my customer side. The other part, and this is very new, the attributes is very similar to how we work in CPQ today with our products, but the asset meters, all of these assets can potentially have a set of historical usage. So how has this machine been used up until today's date, and crucial for moving forward, and we're coming back to that, is the forecasted usage. So we know how much it's been used, but we can also guess or estimate what the forecast will be in the future, and this is of course crucial when providing preventive maintenance. These numbers here can be of any kind, so it can be hours, it can be driven miles, if it's a truck, for example. It can be openings, like in the demo case we have here. If it's a lift door, we can count how many times it's been open, if that's the key metrics that you need for defining the services to provide. As mentioned, when we talk about services, we have now introduced 5 new archetypes, and an archetype is only a template. So services is a very wide meaning of the word itself. So the archetypes are only helping to say what type of services do we provide. So today, in the solution that will be available, the first archetype or template is the scheduled tasks. And this is typically, when you look at preventive maintenance, what do you want to do when? So every 3rd month, for example, or every 1,000 kilometers, I want to change the oil. Can be one thing. And that's a scheduled task. And what differentiates these archetypes is the information they carry. So it's a way to simplify the setup of the service sales. The other part is the labor and material. Typically, if you're selling on-demand consultancy services or expert services, or if something breaks down, you want to provide what will it cost for your customer per occasion, for example. The third big part is the consumables. So if you're having, as Per mentioned as well, we're working with the packaging industry at the moment, and they of course not only sell the machines and the lines, they also sell the consumables that goes with the machines many times, which is a different type of service. Catalog items, spare parts, etc. Very straightforward. And the last part it provides are the trainings. So if you're providing custom trainings, if you're selling new equipment, or if you want to train the personnel in a factory somewhere, you can sell custom training and typically define the days of the training, the travel time for the trainer, etc. These are the five archetypes that will come out of the box. But of course, looking into the future, we're looking into improve and see what other use case and archetypes can we introduce to help the life of our customers selling using the Tacton CPQ service sales. So going into how will it look like for an end user? Once you have had your account with all the assets, you create what I mentioned earlier, a configured service. It works very, very similar to the way you create a configured product today. But it's important to highlight that this is a configured service. On that configured service, you then select what types or what assets do I want to include in this specific service. So you have the bulk list is on the account, but then you select a subset of the assets that I want to provide a contract with a price for in the end. So these, in this case, are my selected assets. So if the bulk list was maybe 20 or 30 rows long, I selected approximately 10 in this case. So there's a difference between what I can use and what I actually use in a service setup. And this is important to understand. See, it's not all, it's a subset. Once I've done this, I move forward and go into, okay, now I know which assets to use. Let's have a look on the services to provide. So there are two things here. One is the roles, and the other one are the products. So the roles are typically what type of roles do I need for conducting the services that I want to provide with this quote or this contract. In the example here, we have different levels. So there might be services that the customer can provide themselves because it only requires a basic certification level, but it also might be very complex services that, in our case, Parker Lifts, who is the manufacturer, need to come out and do every year or every second year, for example. So in this case, you can say that these roles can provide these services. The other part here are, of course, the products, and the products are defined by the archetypes I described earlier. Looking into the products, so when you do edit the products, it looks very similar to how you configure a product in a capital equipment or configuration product in Tacton CPQ today. You define the set. So in this example here, we are selling preventive maintenance, and it's very asset-centric. So for each asset you selected for your configured service, you can do this setup and configure the way you want. And of course, the way we provide user interface is that it's customizable when it comes to the fields and questions that you want to provide. In the specific example here, for example, we also provide, it's a preventive maintenance that you see on the screen. And one key thing here is that if you want to forecast something, you can do it either by interval. So for example, as I mentioned, every 1,000 miles if you're having a truck, or on the calendar, so every third month or every second month or whatever. So you can define here how often do I want these services to happen. Once I've done that and go back, I then start to pick, or I then actually get a list automatically. And here now we're coming into the scheduling part a little bit, because now I get a list of the things, of the products that relates to the services and the interval I defined in the previous step. In this case, I have all the products and I can be happy here, and I can just move on and be happy whatever it suggests. But of course, I can also go into each one of these services product, and I can remove them. I can change them, because just because I said on some high level that I want everything to happen every 1,000 miles, it might be for this specific product, I want it to be part of every 500 miles, for example. So that's fully possible. But the idea is, of course, that you get the set you need. You can decide whether you want to use it or not, and then you can edit or disable the things that you don't, or that you actually want to. So you don't have to go in and add every single task by itself. The system helps you in this manner. Once you edit the tasks, you're more or less done. Because what happens now is that the scheduler, of course, recalculates if needed, but then you get a list of your solution. This is the bill of materials, so to speak, of the solution you provided. And if you look closely to this one, you can once again see that it's asset-centric. So if now in this case, I only have two assets or two systems that I want to look at, and I have preventive maintenance for both, but also for both of those assets, I can see what are the events that will occur, and what is the price, and what is the cost that they will have. So it's a first view of what will happen. This, of course, is not the best view, but at least you get a feeling. Have I included the right things? Is the things happening at the interval that I expect? And this is also divided into the actual events, the routine maintenance if there is something, and any additional tasks that end up in other views in the same page. Once I'm happy here, I kind of like this, I move on to the pricing. And the pricing is looking a little bit different, because the first thing you see here is that the pricing on this, we're still on the configure service, is divided by year. And this year is something that I set in the beginning. I said this was supposed to be a 3-year contract, stretching from 25 to 27. I then get all my prices and costs divided per year and per category. So this is a fairly basic example. So I only have the parts needed for the preventive maintenance, and I have the work needed for the preventive maintenance. But it's a completely different view, and you can work with it in a completely different way than what you're used to do in Tacton CPQ. There is also a view where you can look at it, because the upper view is the contract view, the category view. But on the lower part of the slide, you can see that you can also see it by service product provided. So there's different ways of looking at the same information. Once this is done, I'm more or less done with my service configuration of the service product. I'm not completely done with my journey. So I had the contract-centric, I had the product-centric view on the pricing on the configure service. But as I mentioned, the configure service is similar to configure product, so I could potentially make 1, 2, 3 of these on the same solution. So of course, if I would have multiple, I would love to price them together and provide a contract that is all of the included services. So also on the solution level here, we do have a category pricing. This pricing can of course be edited, and if you're in negotiation with your customers, you can go in and do have the right user or the permissions to do so. You can negotiate here. You can see the view is very similar to the one we just looked at. It's per category, it's per year. You can also actually change the currency, because there's one possibility in all this that have multiple currencies on the same service solution. Typical example is that if you are a global vendor and selling your machines, you might price them in dollars or euro, but the actual maintenance, the people going out doing the work every second month or every half year are local. So that price or cost specifically are done or priced in the local currency. So this facilitates that you can do that, so you don't have to do a lot of workarounds to help that use case. You can also, in this case, have support for indexation. If you have long contracts, of course, there will be indexation. And this tool helps you in that pricing. Once you've done all of this, the last part is, of course, you can create documents. All the information that you created during your service configuration journey is available to print in document with a normal way of Tacton document generation. And then you're done and you can provide a contract for your hopefully happy customers. And that was all from me on the service sales. So I'm handing over to you, Per.
Excellent.
And maybe you can say why they should do this. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go into the business value, just some brief notes about who will be using this and who will benefit from this feature. So many of our customers provide these services either via their direct sales channels, or typically local service partners is really common, which means that oftentimes it's the partner that creates these services based on the assets that the main vendor has sold. And this is also important to point out that Tacton CPQ, we can support both of these cases. We can have direct service sales reps selling and configure the services as Andreas described, but they can also be partners. So partners can have their own dedicated area inside Tacton CPQ where they govern and run their customers and assets and the services on top of those. So it's a tool for both the vendor, the manufacturer, as well as their service partners around the globe. Another shift here, or a possibility here, is that we typically, maybe the new equipment sales was run by a dedicated role, a sales rep, whereas the services are typically sold by a dedicated service sales reps. And many times those two persons and those two roles have operated in different systems, in different contexts, and oftentimes perhaps not aligned properly vis-a-vis the end customer. With this solution, you actually have a unified quoting and sales process where both of these roles are selling the complete solution in the same sales automation tool, Tacton CPQ, which then provides them a much better possibility to act as in a unified voice vis-a-vis the customer. So the messaging and the communication here with end customer will improve based on this. And in the future, we may even consider the scenario where the sales rep and the service sales rep are actually turning into one and the same person, because we are simplifying the sales of both the assets and the services around it in substantial ways. So that's an interesting shift that we see here, and that can be enabled with the feature that Andreas showed us here. So what are the business values typically here? We've alluded to those already, but of course you reduce the cost of your service sales. We make it simple to configure these advanced service solutions, and you don't need to go back to engineering support or back office functions to provide quotes in a quick way. So it really drives down the cost of sales. But it also means that you increase your win rates, because you can respond faster to customer inquiries already early in the buying journey, which means that you beat your competitors beforehand. You also prevent lost revenue, because the cost calculations and that scheduling here that we have focused on really provides you with an accurate and foundational basis for the costs of performing those services, which means that you can protect your margin in a much, much better way. So you prevent those lost revenues due to lost margin control, basically. You also increase the sales volume. You get more service quotes per rep when you make it simple as this to quote services. Also, this unified quoting, you speak with one voice vis-a-vis the customer. We have a system where both all kinds of quoting take place, making services smoother and faster and more seamless. And then, of course, since you are able to offer these highly individualized service packages to your customers, you also maximize the customer's value of your sold assets. So by that, you also eventually you have a happier marriage with your company, and eventually in the long term, of course, you reduce churn and increase the retention rate of your customer. So there are great effects coming out of this exciting new feature. And the most important part, I think, is here that you can start monetizing your customer all the way through new purchase equipment, all through the installation and order fulfillment, but also throughout the owning phase. And then make the customer happy enough to come back to you and buy new equipment down the line. So we hope that this has been helpful for you today. If you want to see a demo of this or a custom demo, please reach out to us. Scan the QR code here or visit our website to set up a demo of this feature for you and your organization. So please reach out. And with that, I think we're done for today. Thank you very much, Andreas, and see you next time. Bye-bye.